Hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. If you haven't been here before, my name is Megan and I'm glad you're watching. Today I wanted to share tips and tricks I've learned along the way for bearing car rides. I already did a video on plane rides, and so there is a lot of similarity, but there are some slight differences that I wanted to mention. With that, if you have any tricks or tips for car rides, please comment them down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say, and I'm sure other people would as well. Okay, so first and foremost, similar to plane rides, car rides for me with craniocervical instability and atlantoaxial instability were often hellish. They were just horrible. And so I would say, first and foremost, if you can, avoid them at all costs. That's what I had to do. Especially when my symptoms got bad, and the farther along I progressed with instability, the less I was able to handle just even being in a car. So I couldn't drive the more that my instability progressed, especially once I was wearing the neck brace. So I was always the passenger. These are tips for if you yourself have instability and you're a passenger, but also if you are a primary driver for somebody with instability. There's a lot of little finite things that people don't always pick up on that might be helpful to know. So, like I said before, first and foremost, sometimes I just wouldn't get in the car. If I already wasn't doing well, I wouldn't go in the car. So the only times that I primarily would drive around for several months was to get to and from physical therapy appointments for my instability. So I was homebound a lot. That's just the way it had to be. Why it's so difficult, if you don't know, if you're watching this and you're a driver, first and foremost, it's the jostling. There are so many movements while you're driving that your ligaments and your muscles are trying to stabilize you as your body's moving, and if you have ligament damage, your body can't do that well. So that is one reason why it's so difficult, all of the movements and the adjustment that your body constantly has to make to the movement of the car. Second, often people with cervical instability, I know for me, have extreme sensory sensitivity. So the noises outside of the car for me were too much to bear. So many different noises coming from so many different angles, and the more angles they're coming from, the worse it is. And then not only outside the car, but often the noises from the car that the car is making, even if they're small, they can be unbearable. And then additionally, if there is noise from the car, noise from outside the car, and then if people are talking in the car, that can be crippling at times. So for those three reasons, driving can be extremely difficult, or being in the car can be extremely difficult. Another reason that I realized was, along with overstimulation from cervical instability, is the movement outside the windows. So even if it was in my peripheral vision, all of the movement was so difficult for my brain to track, even if I wasn't looking, and that would onset a lot of symptoms and make me miserable often. So first tip, if you have a hard collar, wear it in the car. I mentioned this before, but I was not able to wear my hard cervical collar every hour of the day, but if I knew that I was going to be in the car that day, I would reserve some of my hours for the car ride. And then on occasion, if not my hard collar, I would at least wear my soft cervical collar. I have worn that in my review of cervical collars. If you guys have not seen that, it's just a really soft collar, unlike this one. It is just kind of self-explanatory, but those would be my first tips. Second, because of the stimulation, I would wear my Erlen lenses. I did a video on those as well. Those were the most helpful. I had sunglass Erlen lenses that calmed down my nervous system from all of the stimulation. But a second good option would just be sunglasses. That will alleviate some things. Or a third is just an eye mask, a cover. If you're doing really bad, I would say, even if it looks weird, just block out all of the intake of light. And then third, I would wear headphones, or I do wear headphones. So I have noise canceling headphones, big like earmuffs, and then little earbuds. And depending on the day, I would wear either or. Sometimes if the pressure in my head was too much, then the big earbuds were too aggravating, the big earmuffs. So I would have to do the earbuds, and I would just kind of see how I was doing and decide based off that which ones I would use. Next, so with cervical instability, especially having postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, as a result, my body and people with instability, if you have it, you probably understand, have a really difficult time adjusting to temperature. So what I would do is the instant I got in the car, I would have I would either adjust the temperature or have the person adjust the temperature and make it as comfortable as possible, and constantly be adjusting because my body would fluctuate in its temperature so quickly and it could not regulate itself. So if my feet got cold in the car, then they would probably be cold for the next 3 hours. They could not heat themselves up. And it was miserable. So try to regulate the temperature as best you can. I would say I found that helpful. And then if the air is not on, just having circulating air going. Okay, this one was huge for me. Not putting down the windows. I'm really sensitive to noise in flares, so trying to track noise from one window was often unbearable. So there was just a hard, fast rule for people who drove me: no putting down the windows. If you want air, put on the AC. Like I said, for me, noises from multiple directions were too much. Next would be, I learned this one the hard way, avoid elevation gain. With elevation gain, the pressure, the intracranial pressure in my head would become much worse, and all of my symptoms became significantly worse. So if you don't have to go somewhere that has elevation gain, I would suggest you don't go. The piece of advice I gave to drivers was drive as seamless as possible if you can. Avoid hard stops, avoid fast starts, because with my neck, even wearing the neck brace, any jolting forward or backwards from the starting and stopping of the car makes my neck move more, and my ligaments do not have the capacity to properly hold my vertebrae in place. So the more seamless, the better, the less nerves and arteries and veins that are being hit in my body, and the more calm and regulated my nervous system was able to be. So as little jostling as possible, I would suggest. If something I would say to my friends when they're driving me is, you're doing really good if I don't even notice you stopped at a stop sign, which is really hard to do, I understand, but that was really helpful. Next tip, don't unnecessarily put on the blinker because of the noise, the sensory sensitivity. This is not always possible, but for me, my most comfortable position was supine, laying down. So sometimes everything was so unbearable, I had to lay down. I was just in agony. And so there were a couple of occasions I was in a van that had a bed or a couch, and I was actually able to lay down, but that was rare. Not many people have vans. So sometimes just laying down in the back seat would alleviate some pain. Next, I would say is, if you can, avoid highly trafficked areas. More trafficked, more noise, more stop and go. Preferably don't go during rush hour for the same reason, the traffic and the added stimulation. A tip that my friends and I found was putting pillows underneath my arms. My arms would be propped up like this with pillows underneath, would help stabilize my body for me. And then I had less activation to do, which was helpful. I mentioned this in my plane video, but if I knew that a stop was coming, I would try to engage my abdomen, and that would sometimes take the brunt of the impact and help stabilize me so my neck didn't have to try to, which was helpful. And then the last tip for you guys today, when I had to be in the car for long periods of time and I was in absolute agony, one of my friends would sit in the seat directly behind me and cup the outside of my head and literally just hold my head in place for sometimes close to an hour. So that is in extreme cases, but that was extremely relieving sometimes. All right, guys, those are just a few tips. If you have any, I would love if you would share them. Talk to you later.